Welcome, all of you fellow Arcanists out there, to the Frith Guild podcast, where we explore an amazing world full of mystical creatures and their partners. Our hosts are Eric Smith and Scott Wareham, and they'll be your guides along this journey through pirate-infested waters. So grab your Eldrin, strap on your swords, and get ready to defend the seas from evil. Throughout this series, if you've not caught up to the chapters being discussed today, we urge you to hit the pause button, grab your copy of this wonderful book, and catch up. We'll be here when you get back. Safely on their getaway ship, Master Zelfree, Volke, and the other 5 apprentices learn that the dread pirate Callisto has a scale from the world serpent, one of a set of ancient god creatures. Armed with the occult compass, Callisto could find other pieces and make some of the most powerful magical artifacts the world has ever seen. And it turns out they aren't as safe as they thought. Callisto has somehow tracked them across open ocean. So, with Master Zelfree captured and possibly dying, Volke and the other apprentices need to rescue him from the deadliest pirate in the world, find the occult compass which no one has seen in hundreds of years, and tell the Frith Guild what is going on. And who should come up with a plan for what to do? Nicolin the Rizzle. What could go wrong? But before we get to the book, let's look at 2 more pieces of advice from the series. Today's advice are both quotes from Luther, the Nightmare Eldrin. Luther advises Volke, doubt is your biggest weakness, and inaction is often the worst choice of all. Now, let's get into chapters 21 through 25 of Dread Pirate Arcanist.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Frith Guild podcast. I am the host, Eric.
And I'm Scott.
And today we are getting into chapters 21 through 25 of the Dread Pirate Arcanist. But before we get into too much detail, we also want to remind everybody, if wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, or if you're on YouTube watching this, we do ask you to please like, share, comment, whatever you're able to do on whatever streaming platform you're on. It does really help us. It gives us an idea. We're going in the right direction here. So, but without further ado, we'll kick that off in chapter 21 today.
So chapter 21, heading north, we get back into Zelfree talking with Ilya after he finally gets a chance to catch up with her, and he lays into her pretty hard, and I think it's pretty justifiable. He even takes the guild pendant away, and he says that he knows that she stole the venom and that she's acting childish and selfish and really just on her own vendetta rather than looking out for, the broader society or the guild's needs. And I personally agree with how Zelfree handles this. It's more looking at, what is good for the broader society, what is good for not just her mission. At least Volke is, when he went after Ruma, there was the guild doing it for, trying to save everyone else as well. It just happened to line up.
Yeah, I guess, especially with Volke's situation with trying to take out Ruma, he didn't have to go out of his way to steal venom or, do something drastic to try to take him out. So I completely agree. Zelfree is permissible to get into her like he did.
And after they finish their discussion, Zelfree walks out. He pretty much runs right into Volke and knows that he was eavesdropping, whether intentionally or not. And there's this awkward moment where you almost feel is Zelfree going to say something? And then he just lets it go and figures it'll work itself out and kind of walks on by. Adele just finally has the chance to go in and talk about the market and get his little fix in. And he reveals that at the market, Callisto was actually able to get a world serpent scale.
Wow, how rich is this guy? He's got all these crew members. He's got this giant ship. Be throwing money, throwing leaves, making it rain here.
And the world serpent's supposed to be extinct, so I don't know how they got this one scale, but it's not something you're going to be able to find everywhere, so he paid a pretty penny for it, that's for sure. Just to kind of give some more background on the world serpent, it is rumored to be almost a fairy tale mystical creature that's said to really bond with gods. The gods of the men, it's insanely large and extremely powerful. And they talk a little bit, there's some back and forth on what's the use of the scale. It could be used just to imbue powerful artifacts, which is one, dangerous option that Callisto could get his hands on something even more powerful. But then there's also the combination with the occult compass. If there somehow was another world serpent out there, Callisto would be able to find it, and who knows what he could do with it at that point.
It kind of makes you wonder, like, are there a lot of world serpents? Is it just one? Like, is there a place where there's a lot of hatchling ones that you can bond with, kind of thing? We don't really have much more context of that.
The Isle of World Serpents is out there. And the other one, it's, they talk about it in this class of, it's only bonds with gods of men. And you have to wonder, probably isn't the only Eldrin in that class. So what else reaches that tier that is just so far and above magically powerful compared to everything else?
Right.
And they make this plan to go to the port, and not really the first port that you would expect to go to. But what Zelfree wants to do is pretty much hold on to the journal and then find a way to... Callisto will come after the journal, and he'll be able to find a way to fight Callisto at that point.
And you know what? That's pretty smart on their behalf of like, hey, we know Callisto wants to come after us. Let's not go for the very first place he's going to want to search because he thinks we're going there. At least he's got a little bit of sense of like, okay, he thinks we're going to go here. Let's go somewhere else. So like kind of like the opposite direction.
And a little bit, Callisto has shown how strong he is, just from a magical standpoint and from the enhanced stamina from the mana core. So if you can find a way to be on your territory instead of his, or at least a place where he doesn't have the advantage, you need every little advantage that you can get. And after Zelfree comes out, Nicholin comes out as well, and there's this cute little image of him wanting to cuddle with Volke and not wanting to be alone. And it's really cute description and kind of shows this softer side of Nicholin compared to his usual boisterous self and making all his comments and ranting about how great he is.
Right, especially because he's always like puffing his fur up and like, look at me, how cool I am and how amazing I am. You better bow down. It's almost comical, like the way that he's constantly, but
especially with how small he is. It's very much the Napoleon complex coming out. And Ilya comes up and really wants to have a conversation with Volke. And Volke finds this out because Nicholin kind of points it out to him, and it's hinted that he should go talk to her. And there's this great moment of Luther again kind of hiding in the background until he's going to come out and scold Volke for not supporting her the way she probably needs to be supported.
I feel like this is kind of like the only time we ever see Luther come out is like when he's like, okay, I need to scold Volke or something, It's kind of that like big brother kind of almost.
Yeah, it's a teacher. He wants to let Volke drown as much as possible, but he's going to be there to save him if he needs it. And as they're having this conversation, and before Volke actually gets a chance to go talk to Ilya, Nicholin actually goes inside of Luther's helmet and is hiding out and almost playing inside of it. And I have to imagine just the stark contrast in their personalities that Luther is pretty annoyed about this.
Like, there's no way that Luther is not annoyed. Like, I imagine that Luther can't feel anything with Nicholin being inside. But it's just that Nicholin is inside of the helmet, just running around, like, look at all the space kind of thing.
The blatant disrespect for my empty suit of armor. And I think there's some kind of unique thoughts with this. Nicolin's able to teleport. Luther is able to, shadow step. Can they do that together in this? Would Nicholin allow himself to be shadow stepped with Luther, or would he feel it and then go and teleport away? So a very curious situation, and you can see if it wasn't so stressful that there are a few pretty funny opportunities at play there. And Volke does end up going and talking to Ilya and is very respectful and doesn't say I told you so. And I think that would be really hard to do. It's tempting because he was always against the plan and always saw some of the flaws in it, but he is very respectful of her and he is there for her and supporting her. And you see that sibling bond that they have and that they are truly there for each other, truly best friends, truly family. As they're talking, Ilya lets on that Volk essentially brought Zelfree, and not that Zelfree decided to come chasing after his apprentices. And it's frustrating because you feel for Volk because that wasn't actually his true intention, and Zelfree is probably the only reason they really made it out of there alive. So it feels petty, but I think it's one of those moments where Ilya needs a win, and that's the little win that she feels like she can get.
If it had been my sister, I'd have been like, I told you, I told you, I told you. And she would have, she would have hated me for it, but I'd have felt so much better. With Zelfree being there, it's. I feel like once she thinks about it and has time to kind of reflect on it, she'll probably realize like Volk didn't intentionally bring Zelfree with him. That Zelfree kind of just found them. 6 of his apprentices decided to just deuce out in the middle of the night. You don't think he's gonna try to figure out what happened? Like
He'll just let that one go. That's
right.
They're kids. They're doing something. They're out playing in the yard or something. So, and the other strange part of this conversation is Ilya makes a comment that almost makes it seem like she's looking for a little bit more from Volk. And Volk does acknowledge this. And I never thought I would say this, but kind of hints that he doesn't want to be more than siblings, even though it seems like she might be. So, they aren't true brother and sister, but it seems like Volk views her as a sister where she might have some other feelings for him. And then moving into chapter 22, Open Ocean, there's a moment of Volk having some very oddly specific dreams again. And it's another hinted moment of Adele just practicing his dream weaving and spilling a little bit of it into himself with some feelings of wanting to, essentially hide his side and kind of concerns about being noticed. And also in that room is this description of Zaxxas almost cuddling with Forsyth and then trying to play it off that Forsyth wanted it, but it's very cute, and it's another relationship building moment for them. You can tell how much Zaxxas really cares for Forsyth and how close they truly are, and it shows that there is an additional connection with an Eldrin outside of just a pet that is always with you. They are much more than that.
Zaxxas, just it's okay. Everybody is like that with their Eldrin. Accept it and just let it be okay. Like, you don't need to act all Mr. Tough and Almighty. Everybody knows you are. There's no doubt about it. Just accept that you can cuddle with your Eldrin, okay? It's okay.
And after Zaxxas notices that Volk's awake, he asks to have a discussion with him. And surprise, surprise, he wants to talk about the fact that Volk and Ilya were sleeping together on a hammock, and is there something going on? And really implies that he's very jealous of Volk, even though that is not at all how Volk sees the relationship. And we kind of continue to see, Zaxxas is also bothered by the fact of the relationship with Addie and Zelfree. So Zaxxas seems to be very jealous in general, and he convinces, he's talking with Volk about this, and Volk tells him that Addie can't actually heal with her Phoenix magic. So as much as he thinks she is advancing faster than him, she's really just missing this big part of her magic. And it really kind of gives some perspective to Zaxxas of, maybe I'm not as much of an outcast as he almost feels like he is.
The biggest part is that Zelfree never really trains Zaxxas one-on-one. I think, if I can remember correctly, Zelfree just got done training Addie that morning on the ship by themselves. So, Zaxxas kind of has that right to be I think he doesn't really like me, He doesn't ever want to train with me personally. He's always very negative or very, condescending when he, does train with me, and it's just okay, an okay level. nothing's ever great. Nothing's ever like, oh, you did an amazing job with that. So I can definitely see where Zaxxas can start to feel that way, and feel like he's not good enough.
And he even challenges Volk with it and says that if Volk were to go and pressure Zelfree, that he doesn't even think Zelfree would train with him one-on-one. So Volk goes and talks to him, and it ends up being able to convince Zelfree. He does have to convince him, and we learn that Zelfree was actually involved with Traven Ren, who is, looks just like Zaxxas, and there's a lot of relationship there. So anytime Zelfree is with Zaxxas one-on-one, there's essentially additional emotions that are being brought up, and it just makes it really difficult for Zelfree to do it. And Volk doesn't explain this fully to Zaxxas, but you have to wonder, does he know of any of the history with Traven? Was he aware that Traven was being trained by Zelfree? They both have Ren as the name. I don't know if that's how close the relationship is, but there's a lot of questions in terms of how much does Zaxxas know about that past and that history.
Well, I imagine because Phoenixes come from Ruma, and I imagine Zaxxas knows who the last Phoenix Arcanists were that left before Zaxxas Natty. So I imagine there's an understanding of, like, especially with Ren being the last name. So I imagine it's a fairly close relation, especially with the way that Isle of Ruma is. But I'm kind of curious because, like, this is kind of when Zelfree kind of slams the doors open in the closet, and
there's a skeleton there.
Right. So it's like that. I wonder how Volk processed that mentally, because it's definitely taken me a few minutes of like, wait a minute, did I hear that completely correctly? Like, not judging or anything. It's just that, like, I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. Just to make sure here, because
the processing is going on. He's trying to figure out all the connections because there's a lot of them there, and it has a lot of implications for the relationship with Zelfree. And this conversation is really good, not only because Zelfree agrees to train with Zaxxas, but Zelfree also has this realization that this is a gap in where him being a master is. He is not treating Zaxxas the way he should be treated. He is holding something against him that Zaxxas played no part in. And that's something that Zelfree needs to get better at. So that's a great realization for him, and a moment of improvement. Which is quickly wrecked because Callisto shows up.
Because of course, can't go too far without Callisto.
He's always on the heels. And to try and make things a little tougher, Zelfree actually goes into the occult compass entry that describes how to get there. He adds a few more directions on at the end. And a few things that this leads to is, one, we find out that Zelfree is a master forger, which is a very handy talent to have. And two, him just quickly thinking, we are going to give this to Callisto. He's going to get it, but maybe we can buy ourselves some.
And, that's a really great idea. I kind of wish Zelfree would have, like, been able to put directions in the middle of, like, the cartographer's directions rather than at the end. Because, at some point, Callisto is going to make it around the area where the occult compass is. Well, he's going to continue on, obviously, but I kind of wish he did the, like, in the middle of, just to kind of keep throwing him off even more. But, I imagine, hey, we got minutes to figure this out. Let me at least do something here. That's a pretty good idea from Zelfree.
Yes, and you're hoping he points him towards something and Callisto tries to take a shortcut and then maybe ends up having to route along. But it is something that is kind of a last-ditch attempt at buying them anytime they can. And Zelfree has this plan of he's going to be essentially the tribute for the group, and he puts Volk in responsibility of the group, and then he says that he's going to take the journal and just take a boat out to Callisto and essentially sacrifice himself.
And this is where, and we've seen this before, and especially I think at the very beginning of this book, Volke is treated like the lieutenant, I guess. You know, Zelfree being the captain and Volke being the lieutenant. And my military past, I like to relate things to that. That's something I'm comfortable with and I know better. And like, man, why is it Volke that's constantly being picked to keep track of everybody? You know, why is he the one? And then looking at everybody individually, like Addie and Adelgis, like yes, they're good and they're gonna do what they're told, but nobody's gonna take them seriously. Zaxxas, Hexa, and Ilya just proved that they're just absolute hotheads. So they're just gonna fly off the handle and do what they want. So that kind of just leaves Volke. Well, I guess Volke's it. So
He'll disobey orders sometimes, but that's at least better than what everyone else is at. So
in the right context, he will.
there's a little bit more trust. So, and then moving into chapter 23, we get a little more information about the mimic and the relationship, and we find out that Traces is extremely weak when she's not mimicking another Eldrin. Her base form, I guess you could call it, is just a little kitty, and it is very vulnerable. So it's a common reason why Zelfree often leaves Traces away from a battle directly, because if she were to revert to that form for whatever reason, extremely vulnerable and not really able to protect herself.
His Eldrin and the fact that if something were to incapacitate him or whatever were to happen where he happened to lose his transformation and Traces was right there and she got killed, like he's immortal again.
Yeah, he loses all of his powers as well, so he's hit twice by it.
Yeah.
And as Zelfree leaves, everybody is rightfully worried, and Volke actually does a pretty good job here of being calm, being a leader to the group, and taking a course of action to try and protect Zelfree as much as they can. He listens to Zelfree for a minute or two and strives to not chase after him. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But I think everyone is just generally very concerned about the situation because Zelfree is putting himself in the hands of a dread pirate. And there's this talk of Volke doing some measuring, some back of the hand measuring, where he's taken the distance to the horizon, and you take 1.17 times the square root of eye level. And I don't know what their schools are, but there's no way that I could do that on the fly. So the way that they're able to determine any sort of amount out of that of how far away something is impressive in its own right.
Like decimals, it's gonna take me a minute. Once through in the square root, I'm like, yeah, I'm out. Like, this is calculator math. This ain't, yeah.
Yeah, where's the typewriter, Eldra? Zelfree ends up sailing in his little dinghy and sails to Callisto's ship, and the group debates about what they're going to do next, and again just decides we're not going to listen to Zelfree. We're going to split up. Half of the group is going to go get the guild, and then half the group is going to take this daring rescue plan to go after Zelfree.
I swear, if Zelfree could have heard this conversation, he'd have been like, for the love of God, once, just once, listen, please.
It's the theme of the book is really nobody listens to Zelfree. The group ends up landing at Port Rask a couple days later, and Traces is not in good shape. She's in Rizzle form, but is in rough shape and ends up reverting back to mimic form. And this is either implied as too far away from Zelfree to maintain the magical connection, or the fact that Zelfree is likely in so much pain that he's not able to, keep the magic up on his end. And
I like that we start to learn that magic is affected by distance from your Eldrin. So the further away from your Eldrin you are, and not necessarily like, oh, you're 100 yards away, but like miles and miles away, the harder it is for you to do magic, or the weaker your magic is. And I like that we start to get introduced to that here. So this is where chapter 24 picks up into the fog. And again, distance from your Eldrin, and you gotta remember, the Eldrin are what make up the magic. So they're the reason why Arcanists can perform magic, can heal, all of that. So the further and further away that they get, the more difficult it is going to be to heal from any kind of injuries. And Traces knows that Zelfree is really into pain.
Traces is really pushing them to go after Zelfree at this point.
So they're sitting there debating whether they should go back to the compass and all that, and good old Luth there, he says, trust yourself. He kind of tells, like you said earlier about drowning, he's going to let Volke drown for as long as humanly possible, and then he's going to save Volke at the last second and be like, okay, here's your answer. So he does what he has to when he needs to at that time. He tells Volke, hey, you need to trust yourself and be more confident. So, and this is where, because everybody's looking to Volke for answers. He was the one that Zelfree put in charge of everybody, and inaction is often the worst choice of all of it, because not doing something is worse than a bad plan. Talking about good leaders, a good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. Something now is better than waiting. So obviously there's caveats to that, but standing there with a thumb up your butt trying to figure out what to do for half the time that you have available, it's not good.
No, and they have a few options that they're pushing between. Do you go get the rest of the guild? Do you search for the compass to try and get it away? Do you go after Zelfree? And in either case, time is of the essence of those. So the faster you take the path, maybe it is the wrong path to your point, but at least there's something coming. Help is on the way. You're moving towards a goal.
So Luther, some experience from Luther with Mathis was that they would wait out the pirates, or wait out their person they're after, and know where they're going to be so that they can strike them in an ambush. And that's truly a great tactic for this, because they know where Callisto is going to be. He's going to end up somewhere along that path that Volke knows at some point. So they finally decide to have Volke, Ilya, and Zaxxas. Those three are going to go after Zelfree, and then Addy, Hexa, and Adeligus are going to go for the compass. But one of the best thought ideas that they had was sending the two Phoenixes to go get the guild. That's something that I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. That's such a great idea,
Yeah, if they can go and redirect the guild, hopefully they can come and bring some backup, some much needed backup to help support the group.
And this gives them time to plan and everything, and Volke kind of reflects on the fact that in all of these books that he read, all the swashbuckling tales and everything like that, they never talk about the travel time, the waiting, eating, planning, all these boring things. And then he's like, well, I guess that would make for a really boring book too if they put that in there.
Yeah, and Volke is finally realizing that there's a lot more to the adventure than everything he's idealized growing up. He still loves it, but there's some parts of it that just aren't as fun. And they get some interesting advice from Papa Ren. And Zaxxas brings up that, don't be afraid of the challenge, be afraid of the failure. And really encouraging them to take action. They know it's a daring plan. They know there's a high risk of something going very wrong. But if they don't do anything, if they are too scared to even attempt it, things are going to be worse off for it.
And this kind of makes sense as to why Zaxxas is the way he is, charging everything. And I think this gives us a really clear picture on as far as his character, kind of help builds his character, that he's not just this jerk. He's just kind of doing what his dad told him to do.
Yeah, he was brought up with this mindset of take action.
Finally, the third abyss starts to get closer to them. They can see the fog rolling in. So they have Ilya teleport everybody into the third abyss. And this isn't something that's just like teleport once onto the third abyss. It's teleport part of the way into the water, and then teleport another little bit of the way into the water, and then, again into the water, and then finally onto the ship. And one of the most impressive things is, I don't know if she's ever teleported with other people yet. Like we saw when they were trying to get in the underground cave, that she touched them and pushed them, basically teleported them individually, but she never actually like teleported with other people.
It's definitely another step up in mastering her magic and being more powerful.
I love Trace's advice right before they go to teleport onto third abyss. She's basically like, don't mess up.
Very helpful. Where would they be without her?
Good pep talk, thanks. All right, so now we are finally on to the third abyss. Ilya explains that she can't actually like teleport into walls, because like there's that thought earlier of what happens if Ilya just kind of teleports them and they just kind of get stuck in a wall, like you only imagine like, I need help to get out. She does explain that she can't really get stuck in a wall. She can feel like pockets of space that she can teleport to. So it's definitely reassuring, I imagine, for Volke and Zaxxas both, that it's not just they're going to teleport in a random wall or in the middle of a cell or something and be stuck there. So.
And you definitely thought when she was teleporting people down to the cave, she has to teleport like through ground. So there's a chance they just end up, stuck in stone. So it's a very reassuring fact of, I will survive the teleport.
So on the ship, they're kind of looking around trying to figure out what exactly is going on. Like, where are they at? Because, like, once they get on the ship, Volke can see, because he's got night vision, basically, thanks to Luther's innate ability. And they're trying not to draw any more attention than they have to, so it's basically Volke leading them around. Volke pretty much identifies exactly where they are on the ship because of the fact that he knows so much about ships. He mentions that barrels that have metal rings contain liquid, and then barrels without metal rings contain pretty much everything else that's on the ship. Ilya kind of mentions that they were taught all these useless facts about ships. And here comes Luther, like, oh, no, these aren't useless if they come in handy.
We have a use for them now.
Volke also, like, sends Luther out ahead of them to check, make sure the coast is clear, unlock doors, all that kind of stuff, like, burglar Luther. And again, this is a great utilization of Luther. To have him search ahead so that way they don't alert somebody on accident.
And Luther is much better at shadow stepping than Volke, so able to control where he's going, come out stealthily and not just stumble into somebody. So definitely an advantage that he has because he's so much more experienced at doing it.
As they're traversing the ship, they get up at a level. They end up hearing the Wendigo and Bane being punished for not getting the book back from Volke. Because again, Volke stole the book while they were in Port Crown. And this is kind of where we learn that Bane's brother was Calro, and Calro used to be part of Callisto's crew and was actually like Callisto's right-hand man. After Bane and Wraith get punished, the other Arcanists, they aren't healing afterwards. And this is kind of where we realize that because of the Manticore venom, it keeps them from healing properly or at all, or being able to use magic in general. So it prolongs the time for recovery, and it makes it so that they can't actually use their magic.
It's another way that Callisto found to to torture people is, taking away some of their most basic powers.
Right, because again, they can't get the arcane plague. Yeah. They don't have to worry about half the crap that everybody else has to worry about because they don't follow rules because they're pirates. And they could just, oh, we're going to take your magic away from you too while we're at it. Ha ha ha.
They have to find something.
Right? They kind of debate, like, do we go in and kill Bane and Wraith? Do we just kind of leave them be? And I think smartly they decided just, hey, let's keep looking for Zelfree. We need to find him.
There's this discussion between Volke and Zaxxas where Zaxxas's argument is, they're weak now. Would they show us mercy? We should take advantage of it. And Volke pushes more of the moral ground of, they're already weak from a beating. This wouldn't be fair or morally right to strike down some tortured prisoner. And kind of ends up pushing Zaxxas towards the moral high ground.
Yeah, and I'm sure like Zaxxas probably isn't too happy about that, but again, really not in a position to argue about things right now. They're on a stealth mission again, so like it's kind of that like, okay, fine, just we'll leave it be. We'll continue on doing going looking for what we need to do.
It's also life or death, and you just have to make a decision at that point.
Right, like what happens if you don't actually like get them in one go, and then all of a sudden the alarms are going off, and just it's better. Good choice. They decided to just leave them be and continue on the original mission. And again, we see Luther being utilized fairly well with going and stuffing out candles and lanterns and all that stuff, unlocking doors, taking care of everything for Volke and Co. so that they can sneak around the ship as best as possible and quietly as possible.
And for Luther being very much wrong, he makes an excellent thief.
He does. He really does.
He's got the perfect. I can make it dark. I can see in the dark. I can unlock doors. I can probably unlock treasure chests. Perfect.
Like, imagine if Ilya and Volke ever wanted to go rogue. Like, between the two of them, they've got it.
It'd be devastating.
They can do everything. So at the end here, we hear a voice coming from behind a door, and it's enticing Volke, Ilya, and Zaxxas to come inside, and this is where chapter 25 ends off. This will be the end of this episode. I do also want to mention this week we don't have a bestiary. There's really no new creatures this time, is there?
No, it's a short little stint where it's a lot of characters still moving around, but nothing new at this point.
Get some tension being built up for some crazy things going on. So as far as on the podcast, you can find us Podbean, Google Podcasts, iTunes, or Apple Podcasts. We have a Facebook group, Frith Guild Podcast. If you'd like to message and talk with us there, if you want to comment on there as well. We are also on YouTube, so if you want to see us discussing this rather than just listening, we're on YouTube. And we also want to give a huge shout out to the Frith Chronicles fandom again, because without their work, we have to do a lot more work ourselves. So we do appreciate everything they do, and we do get quite a lot of information from them. So if you guys want to get in touch with us, you can email us at frithguildpod@gmail.com. And again, on Facebook at Frith Guild. And thank you for listening, and have a good one. We'll see you next episode.